Right now, on the device you are using to watch this video, there is something running quietly in the background that most people do not know exists. It is not a virus, it is not malware, nobody installed it without your permission. You click the button that put it there yourself, and it is tracking everything you do online. Every page you visit, every search you run, every product you look at, building a profile of you so precise and so persistent that deleting your cookies, clearing your history, switching to private mode, and even restarting your computer will not make it go away. Because it is not stored in a file. It is stored in the hardware of your device itself. This is browser fingerprinting. And if you use Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, the two most widely used browsers on the planet, running on more than 3 billion devices worldwide, you have no meaningful protection against it. Not because nobody warned Google, not because the technology to fix it does not exist, but because Google built its business on advertising, made a 6-year promise to fix the problem, and then in April of 2025 quietly walked away from that promise without fixing a single thing. And what happened next made everything worse. Because in December of 2024, Google did something extraordinary. The company that had spent years telling the world that digital fingerprinting was wrong, that it undermined user privacy, that it was one of the most serious threats to online anonymity, reversed its position entirely. Fingerprinting, Google announced, is now acceptable as long as it is disclosed. 6 years of promising to eliminate a surveillance technology, reversed in a single policy update. This is the story of what browser fingerprinting actually is, how it works on your specific device right now, what Google and Microsoft have and have not done about it, what the latest security research in 2026 reveals about the true scale of the problem, and what you can actually do today to protect yourself. Not theory, not hypotheticals. Real, actionable information that every person using Chrome or Edge needs to have. Let us start at the beginning. With the most fundamental question, what is a browser fingerprint, and why is it different from everything you already know about online tracking? Most people have a rough understanding of cookies, small files that websites store on your computer to remember who you are. You log into a website, it drops a cookie, and the next time you visit it remembers you. Third-party cookies, the kind that follow you across multiple websites, are the ones that advertising companies have used for decades to build profiles of your interests and sell targeted ads. Delete your cookies, and the tracker loses the thread. Start over. Browser fingerprinting is categorically different. It does not store anything on your computer. It does not need to. Instead, it reads information that your browser freely and automatically provides to every website you visit. Information about your specific hardware, your specific software, your specific configuration, and combines those dozens of tiny data points into a single unique identifier. Your screen resolution, the fonts installed on your system, the way your graphics processor renders images, the audio signal your sound card produces when processing a specific test tone, the time zone your device reports, the plugins and extensions you have installed, your browser version, your operating system version, your device's graphics card model. Individually, none of these data points identifies you, but combined, they create a fingerprint so unique that a 2025 study published in the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, one of the world's foremost computing research organizations, found that canvas fingerprinting alone, which uses your GPU's rendering behavior to generate a unique identifier, appeared on approximately 12.7% of the top 20,000 websites in the world. Not the dark corners of the internet, the mainstream web. Major news sites, shopping platforms, social media, entertainment services, nearly 1 in 8 of the most visited properties online is fingerprinting your browser right now. And unlike cookies, you cannot delete your fingerprint. You cannot clear it from your history because it is not in your history. It is in the physical characteristics of your hardware and the specific configuration of your software. Your fingerprint today is the same as your fingerprint tomorrow. Log into a different account. Use a different email address. Start a fresh browser session. Clear everything. The fingerprint follows you because the fingerprint is you, or rather, it is your device, which is inseparable from you in any practical tracking sense. Alexander Hanff, a digital privacy researcher who has spent nearly 2 decades fighting for online privacy rights, published an analysis in April of 2026 that described the full technical architecture of browser fingerprinting in Chrome with a clarity and depth that the privacy community has rarely seen. His conclusion was devastating and direct. Chrome ships almost no built-in anti-fingerprinting defenses, he wrote. Let me say that again because it matters. Google's browser, the most popular browser in the world, does essentially nothing to prevent websites from building a unique profile of your device. And then he added the comparison that makes the absence of Chrome's protection impossible to excuse. Brave has farbling, Firefox has privacy, resist fingerprinting, Chrome has nothing. Nothing. From the browser used by more than 3 billion people, nothing. To understand why Chrome has nothing, you need to understand the 6-year story of Google's Privacy Sandbox, a project that was announced with enormous fanfare, developed with massive investment, and ended without delivering the single most important thing it was supposed to fix. In 2019, Google announced the Privacy Sandbox initiative. The stated goal was sweeping and genuinely important: develop a new set of open web standards that would fundamentally enhance privacy on the internet, not just for Chrome users, for the entire web. The announcement specifically called out browser fingerprinting as one of the primary threats the initiative would address. With fingerprinting, Google wrote in 2019, developers have found ways to use tiny bits of information that vary between users, such as what device they have or what fonts they have installed, to generate a unique identifier which can then be used to match a user across websites. Unlike cookies, users cannot clear their fingerprint and therefore cannot control how their information is collected. The company knew. From day one, Google knew exactly what fingerprinting was, how it worked, and why it was a threat to user privacy, and they promised to fix it. For 6 years, Privacy Sandbox was Google's answer to every critic who questioned whether the world's largest advertising company could be trusted to protect its users' privacy. The initiative was supposed to replace third-party cookies with a privacy-preserving alternative, and simultaneously develop technology to limit fingerprinting. It attracted regulatory attention from the UK's Competition and Markets Authority, which monitored the project specifically because of fears that Google might use Privacy Sandbox to consolidate its advertising dominance while appearing to improve privacy. Industry partners invested their own resources building toward the new standards Google promised to deliver, and then, in April of 2025, Google quietly pulled the plug. The company announced it was retiring the majority of Privacy Sandbox APIs. The promise of a fingerprinting-specific mitigation, the core privacy commitment that had been the centerpiece of the initiative, was abandoned entirely. Not delayed, abandoned. The privacy budget proposal, which would have limited the amount of unique information a website could collect about any individual user per visit, was canceled without implementation. In the words of Alexander Hopp's April 2026 analysis, summarizing the outcome with surgical precision, Google's Privacy Sandbox was discontinued in April 2025 without shipping a single fingerprinting-specific mitigation. 6 years. Billions of dollars of industry attention and regulatory oversight, and not one fingerprinting protection delivered to the 3 billion people using Chrome. But the story did not end with the abandonment of Privacy Sandbox. Because just months before killing the initiative in December of 2024, Google had already made a separate and arguably more significant announcement. The company changed its official position on digital fingerprinting from "it is wrong and we will fix it" to "it is acceptable if it is disclosed." That policy shift arrived quietly in an update to Chrome's advertising practices guidelines, and it had enormous practical consequences. It removed any internal pressure on Google to address fingerprinting as a product problem, because the company had now officially sanctioned the practice, as long as the data collectors mentioned somewhere in their privacy policies that they were doing it. Proton, the privacy-focused technology company, described Google's trajectory bluntly. The abandonment of Privacy Sandbox was not happening in isolation. The same period that saw Privacy Sandbox canceled also saw Google shut down its Dark Web Report feature, a tool designed to alert users when their personal information appears in data breaches. In early 2026, privacy protection features were being deprioritized systematically, while tracking capabilities that generate advertising revenue remained fully intact. Now let us talk about what this means specifically for incognito mode. Because if there is one Chrome feature that the majority of users rely on for privacy protection, it is this one. And the reality of what incognito actually does, versus what most people assume it does, is one of the most important misunderstandings in digital life today. A browser privacy test conducted in 2026 by Digital Digest produced what the researchers described as uncomfortable results. The methodology was straightforward. They launched Chrome in incognito mode and ran it through the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Cover Your Tracks tool, the EFF's public browser fingerprinting detector, available to anyone at Cover Your Tracks, active.org, that measures how uniquely identifiable your browser is to tracking systems. The result was the same outcome most users would not expect: a unique fingerprint and weak protection against tracking. Private browsing did not change that result. Chrome itself acknowledges this in the text it displays inside every incognito window. The disclaimer reads, "Activity may still be visible to websites you visit, employers or schools, and your internet service provider." Now, most users treat this as legal boilerplate, fine print written by lawyers to cover unlikely edge cases. It is not. It is an accurate technical description of incognito mode's actual limitations. The window prevents Chrome from saving your local browsing history. It prevents other people who use your physical device from seeing what sites you visited. That is essentially the full scope of its protection. It does not hide you from the websites you visit. It does not prevent fingerprinting. It does not mask your IP address. It does not stop your internet service provider from logging your traffic. And critically, Google settled a $5 billion class action lawsuit in 2024 over tracking incognito users, a settlement that required Google to delete collected data, but did not require any changes to the technical tracking capability that made the lawsuit possible. The $5 billion settlement, not for a breach, not for a hack, for tracking users who had explicitly chosen the private browsing mode, and the browser that enabled that tracking still has no fingerprinting protection. The lawsuit forced Google to delete historical data. It did not force Google to stop collecting it going forward. The technical capability remains fully operational. This is not a minor gap between user expectations and browser behavior. It is a fundamental structural mismatch. The name incognito implies invisibility. The reality is a window that prevents local history while leaving every external tracking mechanism fully active. And for 3 billion users who have been told, implicitly or explicitly, that switching to private browsing protects their online activity, this gap is not just a privacy issue. It is a trust issue of enormous scale. Now let us turn to Microsoft Edge, because the privacy picture there has its own specific and equally serious dimensions, including a vulnerability that Edge's own manufacturer officially declined to classify as a problem. Edge is built on the same Chromium engine as Chrome. That shared foundation means Edge inherits all of Chrome's fingerprinting vulnerabilities by default. Digital Digest's 2026 browser privacy comparison testing confirmed this directly. Edge failed most privacy benchmarks, with its default configuration effectively mirroring Chrome's. The testing found that third-party cookies are not fully blocked by default in normal browsing, fingerprinting protections are minimal, and with Chrome and Edge together accounting for the overwhelming majority of browser market share, their shared architectural weakness sustains the broader tracking ecosystem across the entire web. But Edge has an additional vulnerability that is specific to Microsoft's browser alone, and that was officially classified by Microsoft's own security response team as a feature rather than a flaw. Bjorn Renning, a security researcher, discovered and documented that Microsoft Edge stores passwords in clear text, unencrypted, readable plain text, in a way that can be accessed by an attacker or system administrator who has administrative privileges on the same terminal server where the user is logged in. Not just the current user's passwords, the passwords of all users logged into the server simultaneously. On a shared server, the kind used by businesses, hospitals, schools, government agencies, call centers, any environment where multiple users access the same system, this means an account with administrative privileges can potentially access the clear text passwords of every other user logged in at the same time, without needing to crack encryption, without needing to bypass any additional security layer. Because the passwords are simply there, readable in memory. Renning was explicit about the uniqueness of this behavior. Edge is the only Chromium-based browser I have tested that behaves this way. Not Chrome, not Brave, not Opera. Every other browser built on the same Chromium foundation handles this differently. Edge alone exposes clear text passwords in memory under these conditions. The researcher reported the flaw to Microsoft in September of 2025. The Microsoft Security Response Center's official response was unambiguous. They deemed the issue not a vulnerability and stated that no security boundary is being crossed, noting that reading Edge memory requires privileges the same or greater as those already held by the attacker. In other words, if someone already has administrator access to your server, that is already a security problem. Microsoft's position is that Edge's clear text password storage does not meaningfully worsen a situation that is already compromised. The security community's response to that reasoning has been pointed. Because the entire premise of defense in depth, the fundamental principle of layered security that every serious cybersecurity framework endorses, is that each security layer should provide resistance even if previous layers have already been breached. Password managers exist precisely because they provide an additional layer of protection beyond system access. If your password manager hands over clear text passwords to anyone with admin rights on the same server, it is not functioning as a security layer at all. It is a convenience tool that happens to also be a security liability in shared environments. Tom's Guide, which broke the story in May of 2026, framed it precisely. Clear text means that passwords are more visible, and in a shared environment, that would be a treasure trove for a bad actor. Microsoft's argument that it is not a vulnerability because the attacker already needed admin rights misses the practical reality of the environments where this matters most. Hospitals running multi-user terminal servers, schools with shared administrative systems, businesses where IT administrators have access to multiple user sessions simultaneously. In every one of those environments, the fact that Edge exposes clear text passwords to any other admin level process represents a real, material expansion of the attack surface beyond what any other Chromium browser creates. Now let us talk about the third layer of this privacy crisis: The one that is not about the browser's own code, but about the software running inside it. Browser extensions. And what happened to extensions in 2025 and 2026 should genuinely alarm anyone who has more than 2 or 3 installed. In mid-2025, Malwarebytes, one of the leading independent cybersecurity firms in the world, documented a campaign involving malicious extensions distributed through the official Chrome Web Store and Microsoft Edge add-on store. Official stores. With verification and featured placement, these extensions offered legitimate, genuinely useful functionality. They accumulated positive reviews. Some received featured or verified badges from the stores themselves. And then, through silent background updates, malicious code was introduced that turned these tools into surveillance malware, spying on users, stealing data, hijacking browser sessions, creating backdoors for further exploitation. Barracuda Networks' security blog, published in February of 2026, synthesized what that campaign and others like it revealed about the structural weakness of the extension ecosystem. Browser extensions, the report noted, run with deep access inside the browser, making them an attractive and persistent target for cybercriminals. Many recent attacks involve supply chain compromises, cases where trusted extensions turn malicious not at the moment of installation, but after months or years of normal, harmless use. The attack works because users install an extension when it is safe, grant it permissions, forget about it, and never revisit those permissions when the extension is quietly updated to include malicious code. Security Week confirmed the scale of this specific threat in December of 2025, reporting that a threat actor had published over 100 malicious extensions targeting Chrome and Edge users simultaneously. These extensions profiled users, read cookie data to create unique tracking identifiers, and executed malicious payloads using legitimate browser API access that users had granted. Over 300,000 Chrome users had installed extensions that were posing specifically as AI assistants, tools presenting themselves as productivity helpers for ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and other AI platforms that were secretly harvesting the content of those AI conversations, along with complete browsing activity and exfiltrating that data to remote servers. For organizations, the implications are severe. Proprietary code reviewed by an employee using a compromised extension. Confidential research conducted through a browser with a hidden data exfiltration channel. Sensitive business strategy discussed on platforms whose conversations are being silently copied and sent to an unknown destination. Barracuda's report called it corporate espionage, often at massive scale. And the term is not hyperbolic when you consider that a single compromised extension installed on the devices of a legal team, a research division, or an executive team creates an invisible, continuous data pipe out of the organization. The Dark Spectre campaign, referenced in the February 2026 Barracuda analysis, represented the most alarming evolution of this threat vector. In some cases, documented by security researchers, extensions remained completely benign for 5 years or more before being weaponized. 5 years of building user trust, accumulating install base, receiving positive reviews, passing periodic store security reviews, and then the switch flipped. The update arrived. And the same extension that had reliably blocked ads or saved passwords for half a decade became a surveillance tool overnight, inside the browsers of every user who had ever installed it. And there is a fifth vulnerability layered underneath all of these that almost never makes headlines because it requires a slightly more technical explanation, but affects every Chrome and Edge user on a network-connected device. WebRTC IP leakage. WebRTC is a browser technology that enables peer-to-peer communication. Video calls, voice calls, real-time data sharing directly between browsers without a server in the middle. It is legitimate, useful technology that powers tools like Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, and dozens of video conferencing applications. But it has a fundamental privacy weakness. When establishing a peer-to-peer connection, WebRTC queries the operating system directly for network interface information, including your local IP address and, critically, your real public IP address. Not the IP address your browser or VPN presents to the website. Your actual IP address, obtained directly from the operating system's network stack, bypassing any proxy or VPN layer the browser itself is using. This means that a user running a VPN to hide their real location and identity from websites they visit can have their actual IP address exposed to any website that uses WebRTC. The VPN, which the user is relying on as their primary privacy tool, is essentially bypassed at the network identification level by a browser feature they probably do not know exists. Chrome has minimal protection against this. Edge, built on the same Chromium foundation, behaves identically. Firefox, by contrast, has added protections against WebRTC IP leakage in its privacy settings. Brave blocks it by default. In Chrome and Edge, it remains an active vulnerability that requires a specific browser setting change or a dedicated extension to address, settings that less than 1% of users are likely to have configured. Now let us get to the part that actually matters to you personally, because understanding the problem is only useful if it translates into specific, actionable steps you can take right now to meaningfully reduce your exposure. The first thing you should do today, before you close this video, is go to Cover Your Tracks. ffinder.org, the Electronic Frontier Foundation's public fingerprint testing tool. Open it in the browser you currently use most often. Run the test. The result will tell you, in plain language, how uniquely identifiable your browser fingerprint currently is, whether you have a strong fingerprint, a randomized fingerprint, or something in between. Most Chrome users will see a strong, unique fingerprint. The test makes the abstract concrete. It shows you in real time what tracking systems see when you visit any website with fingerprinting deployed. The second thing you need to do is audit your browser extensions. Open your extension manager. In Chrome, it is Chrome extensions. In Edge, it is Edge extensions. And look at every single extension you have installed. For each one, ask 3 questions. Do I actually use this? Does its permission level match what it needs to function? When was it last updated? And who now owns it? Extensions that request access to all websites, all data, browsing history, or clipboard access deserve particular scrutiny. Extensions that have not been updated in over a year and that you cannot verify are still maintained by their original developer are potentially dangerous. Remove anything you cannot confidently account for. The third step is to check whether Edge's built-in password manager is where you're storing sensitive passwords, particularly in any workplace or shared server environment. If you're in a business context where multiple users share server resources, or where IT administrators have elevated system access, the clear text password vulnerability that Microsoft officially declined to classify as a bug represents a real risk. Using a dedicated password manager, one that encrypts stored passwords even in memory and requires a separate master password to decrypt, rather than Edge's built-in storage, adds the defense in depth layer that Edge's architecture currently lacks. Fourth, update your browser. This sounds obvious, but it is critical. Google released an emergency patch for CVE 2026-5281, a use-after-free zero-day vulnerability in Chrome's WebGPU Dawn implementation. After active exploitation in the wild was confirmed, the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore issued an alert recommending immediate update to Chrome version 146.0.7000.680.177 or later. A separate zero-day, CVE 2026-2441, a use-after-free bug in Chrome's CSS component, was also actively exploited in the wild before Google released an emergency patch in February 2026. Both of these vulnerabilities allowed remote attackers to execute arbitrary code inside your browser, meaning a malicious website could run any program on your system simply by you visiting the page. Both have been patched in current versions of Chrome. But the patches are only effective if your browser is actually updated. Check your Chrome or Edge version today and confirm you are running the latest release. Fifth, consider your browser choice seriously. The 2026 privacy landscape across browsers is no longer uniform. Brave, built on the same Chromium engine as Chrome and Edge, but with Google's tracking infrastructure stripped out, and active anti-fingerprinting technology called farbling, enabled by default, represents the most practical alternative for users who want Chrome-level compatibility without Chrome-level tracking exposure. Firefox, built on Mozilla's independent Gecko engine, offers the strongest anti-fingerprinting protection through its privacy, resist fingerprinting feature, and blocks third-party trackers by default through enhanced tracking protection. Safari, for users on Apple devices, has expanded its default fingerprint protections in Safari 26. The choice is real, and the differences are meaningful. Chrome and Edge track you because their manufacturers have a financial interest in tracking you. Brave and Firefox do not share that interest. Let us talk about the broader context of what all of this means, not just for individual users, but for the relationship between the technology that runs on 3 billion devices and the people who use it every day. Google's decision to abandon Privacy Sandbox and reverse its position on fingerprinting was not made in secret. It was announced publicly, covered in the technology press, criticized by privacy advocates, and then, almost immediately, forgotten by the overwhelming majority of the 3 billion people it directly affects, because Chrome's market share surged to over 70% on both mobile and desktop in the same period that the company was dismantling its own privacy commitments. 3 billion users. And the user base's response to the removal of promised privacy protections was to give Chrome more market share, not less. Forbes analyzed the trajectory directly. To be fair to Google, the analysis noted, its user base does not seem to care. Chrome's numbers are surging. And that framing, uncomfortable as it is, contains a real and important truth. The privacy crisis in Chrome and Edge persists, not just because Google has financial incentives to maintain it, but because the overwhelming majority of users have not been given a clear, honest, accessible explanation of what is actually happening on their devices every time they open a browser. That gap between what is actually happening and what most people understand to be happening is precisely what this video exists to close. Browser fingerprinting is real. It is deployed on nearly 1 in 8 of the most visited websites in the world. It cannot be cleared with a cookie deletion. It persists through incognito mode. Chrome has no native protection against it. Edge has no native protection against it. And Google, after 6 years of promising to fix the problem, abandoned that promise without delivering a single fingerprinting mitigation, then officially endorsed the practice it had once called a fundamental threat to user privacy. The vulnerability is real. The risk is real. The actions you can take to protect yourself are real. And the choice of whether to take those actions starts with understanding exactly what is running on your device right now, why it is there, who benefits from it, and what the alternatives look like. Now,